Why do we need to care? Why is it so urgent right now? I'm sitting in London and hearing from my friends and family in India about how hospitals are at capacity. There are no rooms in ICUs, ambulances are too busy, oxygen supply is less, crematoriums having mass cremations because the volume of death is so much. India is my home, and India is bleeding. And we as a global community need to care. And I'll tell you why we need to care. Because unless everyone is safe, no one is safe. So please use your resources and focus your energy on helping stop this pandemic. Please donate.
Now we're going to take you back to India, where the coronavirus surge is worsening. As hospitals and morgues remain overwhelmed, supplies like oxygen and vaccines are becoming increasingly tougher to secure. The nation reported more than 386,000 new cases of the virus Thursday, but as Holly Williams reports, the real number is likely much higher.
India is in a life and death battle, fighting the same virus as the rest of us, but with a fraction of the resources it needs. People are dying, gasping for air because hospitals have run out of oxygen. Professor Ramanan Laxminarayan is an epidemiologist who we previously interviewed in 2018 for 60 Minutes.
It's Africa. There are hidden epidemics everywhere.
Is the West being selfish, looking after its own people, vaccinating its own people, and not thinking about India?
And no one is safe until everyone is safe. And I think we need to really think about that as our guiding principle.
Holly Williams, London.
So more on the crisis in India now. I want to bring in former CBSN producer Etayunath Eleti. He is in Hyderabad, India. So good to see you, my friend. It's been a very long time since I've sort of seen you in the flesh and blood. So where you're at, it's sort of central India. Can you give us a sense of what the conditions are like there? And I don't know if you're familiar with, India did very well on sort of the first wave of the coronavirus. So can you give us a sense of what things were like back then and what they're like now? What are you seeing and hearing? Oh, that's very interesting. You returned to India actually not very long ago. What was the return like? What were the travel protocols like? One of the things that we learned in doing this coverage is that India actually has a number of vaccine manufacturing plants. You're painting, a very dire picture. I hope you and your family stay as safe and healthy as possible. Oh, there we have you back. Oh, you're still frozen.
The White House capped off a tumultuous week after the president was criticized for suggesting that disinfectant could be injected to treat the coronavirus. For the first time since Easter weekend, President Trump did not hold a press briefing. Briefings were not worth the time and effort. The president also cut Friday's briefing short, choosing not to answer questions. For more on the president's strategy going forward, Zeke Miller joins me now from Washington. He's a CBSN political contributor and a White House reporter for the Associated Press. Zeke, good to see you. According to the AP, there have been discussions within the White House about changing the format of these briefings. Can you tell us how these conversations started and what the goal is?
Well, number one, White House officials say that they are a time suck for the president and everyone around him. Being up on that stage, waiting around for a couple of hours. That's sort of the first component. The other is that these briefings, which while they started as asset to the president, an opportunity to show that he was a quote unquote wartime president, that was reflected in his poll numbers towards the end of March, that they've now become a clear liability for him. The latest incident on Thursday where he was musing openly about people injecting disinfectants, prompting a round of a backlash from the top government science advisors that was potentially deadly in some cases. It was just only the latest example of that. The president has frequently clashed with the advice and the guidance of his scientific advisors in view of the entire American public now on camera for the last month as he's tried to be aggressive about reopening and minimizing the prospect of there being a second wave of this virus, while medical officials say there needs to be, people need to be realistic about the chances that this can come back and need to take appropriate precautions. So that is leading the White House now to think about how to reframe this. Maybe it won't be the president; it will just be the scientific advisors. As of now, there is no briefing set for Sunday yet. It seems the president, they're trying to sort of slow the tempo down of these briefings because they have become a liability for the president.
Right. It really has been remarkable to watch these very public disagreements play out in front of the cameras, in front of reporters, between the president and his top health experts. So the president has done nearly 50 of these regular briefings, and ostensibly they are meant to provide people with the latest on the administration's response to the pandemic. But Zeke, give us some broader context here. Might there be other reasons why we have so often heard more from the president at that podium rather than his public health experts?
Well, we know the president likes to be his own spokesman. He doesn't. He's been resistant to having press secretaries up on that podium over the last couple of years now, because he feels that he's his own best messenger. So that's obviously one component. The other is that he believes his election is riding on the way the Americans perceive his administration's response to this pandemic. So he is wary of giving up control to anyone else in terms of getting that message out there. Early on, that meant cheerleading the economy and downplaying the risks of the virus. Then when the threat became too big to ignore, it meant sort of transforming himself into a wartime president. And now the president's trying to cheerlead an economic resurgence and a reopening when some of those medical advisors are saying maybe it's a little bit too soon in some of these places to do that. But the president needs to get things reopened if he wants to, in his mind, if he wants to succeed this coming November. And also this comes a little bit as part of a transition point, a pivot point of the way some White House advisors are describing it, away from sort of the urgent phase of the crisis response, which has been the last 2 months, trying to ramp up personal protective equipment, ventilator production, trying to flatten the curve, so to speak. And now as numbers nationwide have stabilized or started to decline, they're trying to move toward the economic message, an area where the president is certainly far more comfortable talking about than the science.
So one of those public health experts that we're used to seeing is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was really a fixture at these briefings until recently, it seems. Zeke, is the dynamic between the president and at least some members of the coronavirus task force changing at all?
There's certainly been some points of tension, both those public disagreements that we're just talking about in front of the cameras, but also frustrations that they had become these meetings, these task force meetings, and then these hours-long briefings in some cases had just become a massive time suck on the days of the medical professionals, the very people who had responsibilities for managing key components of this crisis and the outbreak response. We heard some comments from Dr. Fauci a couple of weeks ago that he was exhausted. His wife was forcing him to sleep in a little bit longer because over concerns about his health. And we heard him as well offer some comments about his frustrations about having to wait around for these briefings, and they go on and on and on. These are important people who have important jobs, and the president keeping them there is often not the best use of their time.
Right. So, Zeke, there are also reports that the White House is looking to replace Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. What are you hearing? Is there a short list of possible replacements?
There are certainly discussions about replacing Secretary Azar. He is right now seems to be the early fall guy for the administration's delayed response to the virus. Even though he was the initial task force leader before Vice President Mike Pence took over towards the end of February. But tensions between Secretary Azar and others in the White House, particularly with the people around the vice president, had been ongoing for more than a year now. It's personalities. There's some history involved there in terms of personnel as well. But he seems to be on his way out. We're told that the announcement is likely not imminent, that they're trying to create a little bit of distance from some of this critical phase of the response to the virus before they make any moves. But certainly that is one that White House officials are not saying we shouldn't be expecting. They're saying we should all be anticipating this sort of move happening, if not today, probably in the next couple of weeks.
Even call centers, which rushed overseas in the hundreds of thousands. How many times you get the call? I'd like to talk to you about your credit card, okay? Or that ad on TV. What is it, Nancy? This is Nancy. Can I talk to a supervisor, right? Okay. Well, it's a little overdone, but the truth of the matter is...